So good afternoon again to everyone. So my name is Bruce Davis of BD Architect. So as Sakshi mentioned, we'll be going over architecture. We'll briefly touch on sustainability, but it's mostly focusing on architecture, this presentation. So today we'll just briefly speak of what architecture is about, how do you become an architect, and maybe some of the various career options that are available as an architect. And so if there's any students that are on the line that may have any questions, you could feel free to just type it in the chat, and then either I or one of the other ACE mentors would try and respond. Okay, so something I usually like to include as part of my presentation is just to show you that, I do other stuff than architecture, other things that I like doing, and also the background from how I became an architect. So I started my educational career at Broward College, and then I transferred over to FAU to complete the bachelor's. So while I was at school at FAU, I had the ability to work with an architect as an intern who was full time. And so that's where I got hands-on experience of what an architect does. And then I was also able to fulfill part of the requirements of becoming an architect, which is internship and actual in-office experience. So we'll touch on that briefly. Some of the other things I like doing when I have time, I like to do online simulation. So flight simulation is something that I love doing. We actually, put in my flight plan and go from point A to point B. And one of the things I like is the realism that, has it happened over the years, both in architecture, rendering, and even in gaming too, how realistic some of these softwares have become, giving you and the clients like a picture of what the project would look like when it's done. And so then as well, I'm from the island of Saint Kitts. So if you could see on the bottom right, this is Florida. So the tiny chain of islands that goes down to South America, just bordering the Caribbean Sea. So I'm from Saint Kitts and Nevis, which is an independent territory. It used to be British years ago, but it became independent. I believe it was in 1980, 82. Okay, so next slide is this was just a flight plan I did where I was tracking. So I had the family member that was traveling. So on the right was the virtual flight, and then on the left was the actual. Actually, on the left is the virtual showing the flight data, and then on the right is the actual airplane flight from FlightAware. They're just showing like we were side by side, actually in real time, just following them. Um, just a little bit of BD Architect. So the work that we focus on is healthcare and commercial projects. So we deal with primarily healthcare renovation. So when a hospital client needs to renovate a department or install new equipment, or it could be infrastructure type projects, then that's what we focus on. Something we tend to do as well is life safety consulting, and then most of our projects, if not all, we also follow it through construction administration. So healthcare and commercial. And so one of the main goals we have is to just execute each project with attention to detail and just make sure that we give a good deliverable at the end of the project that the client is happy. So about architecture, what is architecture is the first thing we'll touch on. Some of the skills that you need to become an architect, career options, and then we'll talk briefly about, how do we go about designing a project as an architect, and then we'll look at some sample projects, and then I also have a couple website resources that talks about sustainability as well that I'll try to touch on. So architecture is is a skill. It's an art and science of creating and designing a solution to satisfy a need. So one of the things that architects do, and many of you in your classes, is problem solving. So what we do as architects and design professionals is that we help to create a design solution that meets a need. So whether it's for a school or a house or a park or whatever the function is, we help to create a design and a built solution for a need. So it involves the various STEM disciplines. So teamwork is a big part of it, because there's no one project that's designed by a single person, designed, constructed. It might be, but it might be a very small scale project. It might not, it might take a long time. But everything you see and anything you interact with is designed by a number of people, designed and constructed by a team. So teamwork is important. Time and resource management. So that's always important. Not just architecture, but anything you do, it's important to manage your time properly. Active listening, problem solving, and paying attention to detail. So a project usually starts with an idea or a need. And so whether it's a homeowner or a business owner or whatever the client is, they have a need that needs to be fulfilled. Then the architect would do some research. So whether it's researching a previous design solution, and let me just back check. Everybody can see the screen, right? You could just let me know, Sakshi. I wasn't sure.
We can. Yep.
Okay, all right. I was just making sure. So, so architect may go ahead and do some research to see what other project types, were similar in nature that was done already, that had some successful parts to it that you could maybe learn from. And so after the research phase, then we start developing concepts, whether it's schematic design, drawings, or just preliminary design of what the solution should be. Then we go into the design phase, and then the delivery is the phase where the project, the drawings and design is done, and then it's transferred over to the contractor to do the construction. So those are the basic parts of a project. And obviously at the very end would be owner occupancy, where the owner actually moves in and makes the project and the space their own. To become an architect, in the US, that is, you require a 5-year bachelor's degree. Work experience, I believe it's still around this amount in terms of 3,700 hours of actual office time working in an architectural office, or different settings are allowed. And I think that works to about 2 years of experience. And so once once you register, so it's through the ARE, Architectural Registration Examinations, is what we have to do and pass in order to become licensed. But so it's through NCARB. And so a student that's pursuing architecture would register through NCARB, and they would develop and log their hours through their online platform. And there's a few key areas that the experience needs to be in. So it shows here on the bottom right the different experience areas that needs to be experienced by the student or the intern. It's project management, practice management, programming, and project planning and design. So these are areas that the architect in training needs to cover, so that once they're finished and licensed, got their license, they're competent enough to be able to continue growing. Because once you finish your exams, you're not at the stage where you stop growing and stop learning. And so that's one important thing to know, is that after receiving your license, it's still a process of learning. So it's a combination of college, completing your degree, doing the internship hours, and sitting for the exams. And one key thing about architecture and architects is that we know a lot about various areas. So we're not structural engineers, but we have to know a good amount about structural engineering, or same with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering, because the architect is in charge, usually in most projects, depending on the main focus. If it's a structural primary project focus, it might be the structural engineer that's leading the team. But in most projects, the architect would be the leader of the team for the design team side. And then we would be directly responsible to the owner for the design and the schedule of the design services for the project. And so some of your students, if there's students on the line, we start with a mentioned an idea, then it develops itself into a program or a list of functions that might need to be part of this project. So what you're seeing here, and I'll just run through a couple examples here. This one is a list of rooms, very basic, something that you'd understand as well. So you start with a list of rooms, and then from looking at the names of the rooms, you could tell that this might become a residence of some sort. So we start by laying out the spaces, kind of formatting like where we think things should go, where does it make sense? And then we develop that into some sort of a design where we review it with the owner and get their input. And then we end up with the floor plan. So here you could see that the list of room names was transferred into some sort of a bubble diagram or adjacency diagram. And then a floor plan was developed. So it takes a period of time. Various scales of projects could take different lengths of time, but smaller projects could take just a few weeks or maybe a few months to develop the different scales. This one is another quick example. So this is office. You have lecture hall, conference room, study areas, book shelving, stacks, check-in. So this might develop itself to becoming like a library type space. So that's generally what you would do with the project that you're going to be doing this year as well. And towards the end, I'll go over that as well and just quickly walk through the three different projects. And the key thing is, as you read any project description, is to kind of highlight and see what are some of the key features that this person is asking me to design for, or what are the key solutions that they're asking me to come up with. As an architect too, just like many careers, you could choose to specialize in certain areas. So if you are a person that loves anything to do with like churches or worship centers, and you could maybe work for a company that does like churches or public spaces, auditorium type spaces, theaters. If you love residential, you could potentially work with a company that does residential, healthcare, if it's museums. And so you have a wide variety of project types that you could choose to specialize with when you become an architect. And much of that experience, you would know that probably when you start working with a company that either specializes in something or maybe have a company that has a big variety of project types. And then a lot of it is just yourself. You just choose to see and learn about the different careers to see what the options are, and then you see what fits what you like doing the most. And so in the end, you just want to be comfortable and enjoy whatever path in architecture or the other AEC industries you choose. Um, on the top, this is our early rendition of the early rendering of the Broward Convention Center. And some of you, if you drive across there, you could see it's almost finished. I don't know if any of the mentor firms on the line had a role in that. I don't know do you know who did structural engineering for that one, Sakshi? I don't know if you're familiar with that project, but there's some
No.
projects. Yeah, yeah. So it's always amazing. I think once you go through with the next these sessions in school, when you start meeting with the mentors for the other sessions, you would see some interesting projects around town that, hey, I didn't know you were involved in that, you know. It's interesting to be able, as a designer, to go through the city or just to visit a building and remember that you had a role in the design for that building. So other project types could be convention centers, transportation, theme parks, could all be part of that. Career snapshot. So I talked about healthcare architecture being a specialty that you could choose to do as a career. And let me bring this slide up for a second. And what I'll do, I'll share this slideshow with the team so that they could send it out to the schools who would be interested. So this is a document that I came across that talks about careers in architecture and beyond. So You might be an architect that loves to, you know, not just design, but maybe to figure things out. Maybe you're a person that investigative. So you could probably be an architect that does like research investigations of project if why buildings failed or why you have certain accidents, and you could possibly be like an expert witness on certain legal teams per se. So you could take various angles as an architect, and so what I'll do, I'll provide this to you as a handout so you can see there are many different areas that you could go as an architect. And then also have part of the presentation, I have another slide that goes over that too. Okay, so let's continue. All right, so landscape architecture, that's architect that deals with anything outside the building. So when you think of golf courses or parks, this one is in Hollywood. And so there was a landscape architect that was involved in creating this experience. And that's a lot of what architecture is about, is creating an experience that, when somebody visits that building or site, they feel a certain way about it. They feel in a park, you would expect to feel maybe peace, quiet. And just imagine if any of you have ever been to this site, if you haven't been, I would encourage you to go there. You could see how the landscape architect created different features that, even though in a very, car-oriented, vehicle-oriented area, it kind of creates a little peaceful environment in the middle of this park. So I would encourage you to check that out. Some other career parts, technical architect, you could be a BIM manager, you could be specifications, right, to the person that deals with all the paperwork that um, the specs for the materials, equipment that's used in a project. Interior designer, you could be a consultant, sustainability consultant. You could be various roles as an architect. And that's one thing that we hope you get out of this presentation, is just knowing that there's many options for you as an architect if you choose to go that road. Just a quick few images about some of the basics of construction drawings. So this is relatable to many of you students that might be on the line or that would see this. Because this is just a typical residence. So in this case, you're seeing on the left side, the floor plan is where you look at the building from top view down. If you were to say cut the building maybe at 4'6" high, and then you were to look down and see what the layout of the rooms are like. So you could see door swings, you could see sometimes furniture, you could see cabinetry countertops, the bathroom, and you could see like the entrance to the house. So that's a floor plan, and it communicates to not just the owner, but to the contractor, most importantly, what the building is going to look like and how it's going to lay out. Similarly, you have a plan view where you look up, and that's the reflected ceiling plan. And so in that view, you'd see the ceiling fans, your light fixtures. You'd see anything that's important and interesting about the ceiling design that needs to be built. And it's just a tool to communicate the design from the architect to the contractor and to the owner as well as they build the project and then eventually move in. Another part of the design package could be a plumbing plan. And so this would be more, the plumbing engineer would develop this work, but the architect would create the structure of the floor plan. And then the engineers will work together on coming up with the layout for the infrastructure. So the plumbing contractor would take care of all the drawings relating to the plumbing, the water supply and drainage for the building. Then you'd have the electrical engineer, sorry, would come up with the requirements for all the light switches, light fixtures, the specs. If you have a generator, electrical panels, they would locate all those things based on where the architect would show in the equipment plans, items that need electrical service. And things like that. So on the left, you have a plumbing plan for a simple house. You see plumbing that's going to the bathrooms. And then you could see plumbing to the laundry, and then the where it comes into the house. Also on the right, you see electrical plans, so you could see the little dollar signs represent the light switches. And then the dash line shows you which light fixtures are connected to that light switch. So the contractor knows how to wire them. This is a mechanical plan, shows the mechanical closet that serves this particular house, and then it shows the distribution of the ductwork that will be above the ceiling, and it shows how the air gets back to the unit as well. And so many of these things you interact with a building on a daily basis and you don't see it, you just know that, oh, the building feels cool. If you walk into a building and it feels hot for some reason, then that's when you start thinking about things. But when things are functioning as they should, you typically don't think about it unless you're really interested in that. So next time you go into even the building you're in right now, start looking around to see some of the things and imagine what's behind the walls, what's above the ceiling, and what's all concealed to give you a comfortable environment and what it feels like to be in that space that you're in. This is just some other drawing nomenclature that you'd come across. Interior elevations, that's looking at maybe cabinetry or whatever. You might have a special feature you'd like to put on a wall on a particular building. Maybe it might be a feature wall that has built-in artwork or things like that. So you might do that using an interior elevation to show those features. This one is a building cross section, just showing the ceiling height and showing the roof structure of this particular building. And then you have an exterior elevation here as well. Some of the software that we're using as architects, primarily we use for design, we use Revit primarily. And there's some that still use AutoCAD as well, depending on what the company prefers. The majority of firms are currently using Revit, which allows you to draw in 3D at the same time and work things out, clash detection and things like that. Autodesk Tinkercad. This is something that's more elementary in terms of like just getting kids, much younger kids, exposed to modeling and 3D design. But the good thing is that all of these are available for free for students from the manufacturer's website, free for download. So these are some resources that would be part of the presentation when you receive it. So this link gives you some careers, talks about different careers for college graduated architects that you could go into, NCARB. And then I believe you may have access to ACE Mentor tools as well, where there's different activities up there for students that are part of ACE mentoring. AIA is a good resource as well, the American Institute of Architects, and they do have a lot of videos. If you're interested in becoming an architect, there's videos on the AIA website that tells you different things about architecture. You could just easily search them. Okay. So we talked about architectural design earlier. The idea phase is coming up with what this building needs to include. And then let's see here. The programming phase. So this is all part of that concept idea phase where we develop what needs to be part of the building or the project. And so you saw with the house and library example earlier, you saw that we laid out the rooms, kind of where it made sense. We had lines interconnecting the room showing where connectivity was necessary. So in this bubble diagram, and this might be an example that you might be able to use when you're developing your project, is come up with a list of spaces that's needed, then come up with maybe a bubble diagram or that shows relatively, maybe a relative scale. Sometimes, for instance, you could see here where some circles are smaller than others. So this could mean relative scale of that particular room, just giving you a reminder that this room needs to be a certain size, as opposed to like an office or copy area, that the design area or the marketing area needs to be a certain size. So you could use a tool like this to develop your project as you go the next step. Another method is adjacency matrix, but this is more something that I used in school rather than in practice. But this one is listing the square footage. So you have the rooms. So you have the rooms listed on the right here. And then when you go further left, you see the number of those spaces, the quantity of those spaces that you need. So you need one lobby, one reception area. You might need 10 medical spaces. So this is the quantity of those rooms that you need, the size of each, and adjacencies, whether you need public access, daylighting, privacy. So different features that might be necessary to each room. And then this other part kind of gives you like an idea of which rooms needs to have proximity to the other one. So the lobby, for instance, doesn't have to be, next to the mechanical room. So where these two lines intersect, they put a red dot saying there's no relationship really. So a mechanical room could basically be anywhere in a building that makes, sense. And reception, so and lobby intersect. So and they put a green dot there saying that, it needs to be adjacent to each other. So usually when you go to a building, the main lobby, you'd expect to be greeted with a reception desk or somebody that gives you information of, where next to go. So this is another tool you can use potentially. You just see which one works best for your teams as you develop your project. I talked about this a little bit, the stages of design, pre-design, the client need identified, the site selection happens. So everything that we build or design has a place. So it's somewhere in the world. So whatever project you're deciding to do, so of these competitions, I believe you would go through this some more with your mentors later on, but decide where, unless the program tells you it needs to be a specific spot, decide where it's gonna be. And however you design this building, this project would have to, have some relationship to the surrounding areas. So one of the first projects that you'll be designing is a net zero data center. And so as you read through the description of the project, just make a habit of highlighting or underlining things that stand out to you that seems to be important, and then make sure that your project includes some of those features. So a net zero data center, the other one is a cultural destination. All right, so same thing, there's a description of what the project should include. And then the third one is a modular tech-enabled building. So same thing here. And so one of the first things to do is to decide where exactly this building is going to be located. What's the site? So that you could start responding to the surroundings. Because a building has to have a place, a project has to have a place and fit in with, who's going to be visiting that building and the people that are going to be using that building. All right. So that's all part of the pre-design phase. The design phase is where the architect starts meeting with the users and start developing the project. And then the post-design, that's during construction where the project is built, inspected by the necessary agencies, and then it's turned over to the owner for occupancy. Site analysis is a tool that you would use once you decide where your building is going to be located. And so that's there's various methods of doing that. It could be graphical, where you just print out an image or Google Earth image of the site and start marking up like where are the main streets, what's the sun path, how, where do you have noise entering the site, and then the surrounding areas. So you could probably do that graphically. And it's better to do it at the very beginning, before you even start thinking of what the building is going to look like. It's better to get some of these things figured out upfront so that you know your building design or your project is responding to the context in the best way it can. So you'll work with your mentors to develop maybe something of this fashion, and then you could include it as part of possibly your presentation towards the end. Another thing that we have to respond to as architects, it's zoning, because each area of a city, most developed cities, unless it's maybe some rural area that might not be as developed, but within a developed area, you would have designated uses for land. So that would play a role in the site you select as well. It could be a commercial zone where it's primarily focused to have commercial type buildings, maybe residential. Nowadays, you see a lot of mixed use developments, especially even if you could think of even downtown Fort Lauderdale or something that's close to you, you see a lot of mixed use developments where you may have shops and then um, you have shops or restaurants maybe at the ground floor, and then you may have residences above, and maybe parking, you know, as well attached to that site. So zoning, what that does is the city determines where within a developed area you can have certain uses that are compatible with each other. And the main thing is to prevent the mixing of incompatible or non-compatible uses. So for instance, nobody would want to have a energy plant or some sort of a high industrial use in the middle of, where they live, because you would think of maybe pollution or noises that could, affect the people when they're trying to sleep at night. So that's one important thing that we don't often think of, but that's established to preserve, communities and make sure that uses are compatible with each other. It's just another example or feature of a site analysis. And so it's just graphic. You have a legend that shows certain things, maybe show pedestrian access. The thicker line may show where you have heavier pedestrian traffic, and then the thinner yellow line, so we show areas of lower pedestrian traffic. Whatever you know, legend or the symbols you use, as long as you can understand it and it makes sense to you. It just helps you decide what your building is gonna look like, how people are gonna get to it, and things like that. All right. And this is another quick example. The blue lines, I believe that is showing, it's a little hard to read, but I think it's talking about prevailing winds. The green lines in this looks like it's referring to a highway that crosses the top here. And then the project occurs within this brown area. So in this sketch, it was just analyzing the things that are surrounding the site as it pertains to whatever project is proposed for that area. One of the good things that we have to we can use nowadays is just search online. You could just use Google Maps, Google Earth, and you could just visit a site. And most times the images are close, might be, some of them might be a few months old or might be a year or so old. But before you visit a site, you have the ability to be able to visit it, either Google Maps or another map software. You could use Google Earth, Street Views, and then you could do measurements in real time. So that's one of them that I use often is Google Earth. And so and it's a free. You could download it as a desktop app, or you could also I think use it on the web. So you just type in where you want to go to. You just say Fort Lauderdale Airport, and then you just type it in, and it takes you right there. And with Google Earth, you could do measurements, you could do street views. There's many things you could do there, right? So this is something that you may likely use as you develop your project. You could, for instance, use Google Earth to get the site overview, and you could do your analysis with that. So Google Earth is one thing that I would recommend. Go back to this one. You also have the county, whichever county you reside in. Most cases, they would have a property appraiser's website where you could go and find out information about the site, the size, the property cost. And then you could go to the county's planning and zoning website to see whether what is that area zoned for. So the area that you're choosing as your site for your project, you could check to see what's the zoning and the land use for that area. So this is what we saw just now, Google Earth, the property appraiser's website, and in this case, it was what I had selected here was, I think it was Atlantic Technical College. This slide is, I think, is a little bit old, but Atlantic Technical College. And so on the property appraiser's website, you could click the site and then it gives you different information about that property. And you can see it highlighted here. So if you click on any other property, you could get similar information about that and even images of the property as well. So this is something you could even try out at home whenever you have time. The county or the municipal website for zoning, so you could know what the zoning designation is. And this is some of it is just informational, but this is something that we deal with all the time as architects. Here we talked about briefly, we talked about the phases of design. So in this case, you're seeing just a few things. You're seeing a program on the left, a room program, and then you're seeing a design schedule that was put together for this particular project. So, because throughout the course of a project, we have to determine when it's going to start, what's the milestones we have to hit, and then we have to represent that to the client so that we're all aware of the milestones we have to hit because the client may have a particular move-in date that they need to occupy the project. So this is a sketch, an earlier sketch of this particular project. And then it changed over time, the design changed. It was a physician suite, a physician practice, and then we ended up designing the project based on, I think, the second sketch, second iteration that we came up with. And then the project is built. This was the layout that was done for that. These few other images, this is an older project with a prior firm, and that was in the city of Hallandale Beach, and it went through the same process. There was a site that was existing, it was a park, but it was very small and it needed to be expanded, developed for the community. So the project went through I think it was a couple of years of pre-design where they had to have meetings with the community to get input. And then they went through the design process. And then I think it was finished a couple of years ago. So this is Bluestein Park in Hallandale, the city of Hallandale Beach. And this is what it was prior. It was just this, the two baseball diamonds and small aquatic center. And then this was the process. This is just for informational, just giving you the timeline of, how long it took for the project to go through the process. This was some of the team members that were part of the design for that project. And then these were some earlier renderings of, what the project could look like as far as the layout of the playing fields and the aquatic center and things like that. This project also took a period of time to get through design and construction, which is represented here. This project also had schedules, and so one of the deliverables, I believe, for the construction team as part of the project might be coming up with a construction schedule. So just as you have a construction schedule, you also have a design schedule that we need to meet. We had a listing of rooms, the functions that needed to be part of it, the approximate sizes of these rooms, and then there was some very elementary, not elementary, but preliminary bubble diagrams that were done with the relative size of the rectangles is related to the size of the space. So a lobby, which was going to be like 2,200 square feet, they did it with a smaller rectangle as opposed to the gym, which is 8,000 square feet. And so the line is just showing that there needs to be a direct connection between the lobby and then the gymnasium for this particular program. So that developed itself from the left from a bubble diagram or adjacency matrix into a floor plan that was developed, and then that became the actual layout for the building that was designed. So if any of the students that are on the line that live in Hollandale or close to Hollandale, you might be able to visit that project. And one of the things I'll quickly touch on, because as far as sustainability, because that wasn't a particular focus of when I had prepared this initially. But for sustainability, the main components of sustainability is just being mindful of the buildings that we design to ensure that we limit the use of raw materials, the resources that we take from the environment. It needs to be easily replenished. We need to be able to reuse some areas where we're building in already developed areas, cities that maybe have existing buildings that could be repurposed. The idea of reusing a building rather than completely pushing it down and just creating a new use with the existing building. So anything that we could do to reduce the things that go to the landfill, basically. So what I have here, and this is just from the web, for sustainability, there's a number of different agencies that a design professional can consider as far as that has different criterias of energy efficient or buildings. And one of the main ones that we have in the US is LEED. And so I have it here. I'll probably include a link for this too. So LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So this is one of the ratings or the sort of certification that a building may go through, where you have different categories, you have different certification levels. Is either silver, certified, gold, platinum. And so it goes from lowest to highest, basically, in terms of a certified building may have implemented would have implemented a certain amount of sustainable practices, but a platinum, whereas would have achieved like the highest level of sustainability in terms of what could have been done for that particular building. So it's just different levels of sustainability for different buildings. There's others. You have WELL is another rating system, WELL Building Institute, Fitwel, Green Globes. So every project that is done should have some levels of sustainability that's included. It may not be certified, it may not be a LEED certified or registered building, but anything we do, even the projects that we do, whether in school or at home, we try to be efficient with the dollars that we have, the money that we have to spend, and any potential harm that we could create to the environment in the projects that we do. So that's basically the idea that goes behind sustainability design as well. So there's many agencies out there, and you could check them out. I'll include maybe a link to this website as part of the presentation. Okay, so I think that's mainly the presentation. I have a few other slides that I'll show you quickly, and there's some session questions. And Sakshi, you could let me know whether you would need these questions to send to the teacher. I don't know if they're going to be doing like interactive where they'll be graded on some of the questions, but I'll have a few questions here about the presentation that we did that you could submit it to your teacher if that's necessary, right? Just a quick couple slides I'll go through. This is about some interesting architectural that's out there. This is I think there's a building similar to this up in Orlando. I think it's Ripley's, believe it or not. So he could be the whimsical type designs as an architect, and whether it's for parks or entertainment venues. This one was for a company that made these bread baskets, and so they actually had their building design in the form of a bread basket. This one, I think this is in Europe somewhere. And then I think some students are presented this to say it looks like an organ, a part of a body. I don't remember what type of building it is. It could be a museum. It looks like it's, the type of building that could be a museum type feature. Um, this was in Dubai. It's a rotating tower, so each floor of the building slowly rotates along an axis. This one, you could see a mix of like, you know, older historic type architecture with the newer style. And then this was described as maybe a person dancing. So the structural columns that are leaning could be the feet or the legs of the woman dancing, and then the glazing is of the dress that she's wearing. So it could be different types of things you could design as an architect. This one is in Miami. If any of you have been close to the Miami Heat's arena, this is across from that stadium. It says a Zaha Hadid design. And then this one is a church building. So as an architect, you could do various project types. You could do, go into different career angles as an architect, but the important thing is that you just have to be prepared to work together as a team with others and be a good team player. So with that said, I'll leave it to Sakshi and then to do your wrap up. And if you have any other questions for me.
Thanks, Bruce. That was a great presentation. I want to see if there's any students in the chat, if they have any questions that they want to ask now. Any mentors? Do you have any questions? I did have a question, Bruce. I was wondering if you could share a little bit, because we have some new mentors here this year and like a new school. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what deliverable is expected at the end of the presentation and what softwares they could use at their level to do the design. Do they need to print out PDFs, or what is some of the winning presentations in the past year? What have they produced for architectural deliverable?
Yeah. The main thing would be to have a thought out solution, a well thought out solution to whatever you decide. Have a good reason as to why you chose the particular solution. So whichever of these three design challenges you decide to do, just have a good reason as to why you selected it. And so that would create your foundation to start. And if you show a good process of, the, the rooms that are needed, the floor plans, with the floor plan creation, you could start off just by sketching it. You don't have to necessarily get into one of the drafting programs right away. It's available, it's easily available, it's free to students, where you could get all of the Autodesk software. So some students in the past use AutoCAD to come up with the floor plan, some use SketchUp. But the main thing is how you communicate the idea is important. So it's a combination for the deliverables. It will be a combination of a story, the project that you selected, where is it located, the floor plan. So obviously you would have to have architectural floor plan show an understanding that the building needs to be supported structurally. So if you have some interesting structural system, like for instance, in this image, this particular facade, it's decorative, but it's also structural, has some structural elements too. So just have an understanding of the different systems that are involved: mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural engineering, site design. And so you would get distributed to you the list, the checklist of items that has to be part of the presentation. But all in all, I would say the main thing is to just have a compelling story as to why you selected the particular project as your design challenge, where is it located, and communicate effectively, what it's going to look like. So in combination of floor plans, exterior views, elevations, and then the construction component too, because ACE, architecture, construction, engineering. So we look at all components of the project. So just have a compelling story of how you present your PowerPoint. And nothing is printed hard copy. It would be beneficial if you think it's necessary to bring something printed towards the final presentation, that would be good. But most things are just electronic. So where you have PDFs on a slideshow, but the main thing is just communicating your design solution. Is the easiest tip I would say.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, about the questions that you shared, so the mentors that are here, you can use those questions. So this time, since we're doing things a little differently, we do plan on watching this presentation in the class with the students, and the purpose of that is that we have mentors available if they have any questions, so they can ask you and you can either answer them right away or reach out to, Bruce or me, send me the questions and we can coordinate sending you the answers. So you can use those questions before the start of the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, you can collect responses from the students in the class. So that's one way of using it, even if the students are not getting graded for these questions like they have in the past. Or you can talk to the teacher if they would like to actually collect the responses and use them to provide a grade to the students. You can work this out with your individual school teacher.
All right.
Yeah, and any other pointers, Bruce? We just have a few more minutes. If no one else has any other questions, do you have any other like pointers or tips for the particular project topics that we have this year, or any project topic that you recommend?
So I haven't delved into the three challenges closely as yet. I would say maybe just to not get caught up in the details of the floor plans. So sometimes the students may get caught up with just trying to get a perfect floor plan and don't spend enough time on developing the other stuff. Or they may get jump into the floor plan layout too quickly without really thinking about where the building is located or and what needs to be part of the building. So just have a reasonable process, a good process, where as long as you trust the process and work through the steps, you would come up with a good deliverable at the end. So just trust the process and then trust the mentors that you'd be working with, that would be guiding you through it. And then always ask questions during the class sessions. So just don't be afraid to ask a question. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Bruce. Great
All right.
presentation.
All right, everyone. Have a good evening.
Have a good
Thank
evening,
you,
everyone.
Bruce.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.